Welcome back to Dan Proft. I am Mike Coolidge in for Dan Proft on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Joining us on the phone right now is the newest chairman of the Illinois Republican Party, Bob Grogan. Bob, welcome back on to the show.
Thank you.
Yes. So I understand you were just in Washington, D.C. You strolled on into the White House there. Why don't you tell our Illinois listeners particularly what that was about and how that was? Did you meet President Trump? Did he tell you we need to flip Illinois red?
Sure. Well, first I have to say you can't just stroll into the White House anymore. Unfortunately, those days are long gone with security and such. They have to take that very seriously, level upon level of that, getting searched and wanded down and everything. I did not get to actually talk separately with President Trump. I was within, about 5 feet of him there when he came and addressed the group. He got to talk to all the county or the state chairmen from across the country. It was we spent the day meeting together with RNC, talking about the prospects for the midterms. I will tell you, it's not nearly as bleak as history would point to it. I think the Republican Party is in really good shape relative to, the normal 6-year itch that sometimes can happen. We are financially poised. The Democrats literally have negative cash balances. They got burned out there in that Virginia referendum and some other things. And the Republicans are doing really well from a fundraising side. And then we just have really strong candidates and a really good game plan.
Yeah, I got to think, the traditional history says that the party in power loses seats in the midterms, and whoever's in the president, the opposite party wins. But I don't know. I'm looking at a lot of the polls, and it looks like the Senate might be safe for Republicans. And the House, that's always a crapshoot. There's not really any polling for congressional seats, or rarely is there. But here in Illinois, do you see any possible flips in the congressional delegation before we get into some of the other races?
Yeah, I don't want to jinx anyone in particular, but we've been really focused in on. Obviously, I think we're going to successfully defend the 3 spots that we already have. And the Democrats, they really did overreach on their gerrymandering on that. They literally, they assigned it to an AI program. Could you gerrymander anything as bad as you do in Illinois? And it struggled, to be able to come up with a map as, disadvantageous to Republicans. But in doing that, they have to create some districts there's only so many Democrats to go around, right? And so, we do definitely have some really good, strong candidates on the congressional side who are, really doing actually above expectations already, whether it's fundraising, grassroots organizing, social media likes and clicks. And so we really, I think, we can surprise people. And Illinois, by the way, the Democrats are in charge here. So if people are mad at how the direction of government in Illinois, you can only blame the Democrats.
Yeah, they have super majorities, listeners, in case you didn't know. And that obviously is a huge battle coming up, trying to just gain a couple of seats in the House or the Senate in Springfield. I'm looking at a list here of seats that here in Illinois, talking about, Springfield seats, State House and State Senate seats that could flip either way. Doris Turner in Springfield, Senator, Representative Brandon Schweitzer, Republican in Danville in the 101st. Amy Murray Burrell running against Liz Bishop in the 76th. That could flip. House District 65, Dan Auguste, Harry Benton, this character out of Plainfield, this Democrat in 97, who I think the latest on him is that he's gone, right? Or he's not going to be on the ballot.
Right.
And then a couple of other decisions. Any particular seats, or do you want to talk at all about the possibility of us flipping some seats so that we're out of the supermajority, or the superminority, I should say, come January?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you listen through a lot of the ones, and some of them they're tough on our side, and they're going to be tough on the other side. Really, the difference is if apathy is truly the opponent that we have to deal with right now. Folks, you just can't yell at your radio dial. You actually have to show up and visit the polling station, or God forbid, do a vote by mail or something like that, and actually get the votes in. It's about turnout. Actually, the biggest one that I think is most disturbing of all, the race that unfortunately is not a race, is the one down in Champaign, where Representative Ammons was just indicted for federal fraud charges and conspiracy charges. Basically, she was, funneling money to her daughter through the state's budget. She had been warned about it, and she went around, what she'd been warned about, and continued to do it. And the worst thing about this is the Democrats, the way they have rigged the rules is we literally can't run anybody against her. We didn't get anybody to file for the primary, and so therefore we can't even though she's under indictment, we're not allowed to even have a convention or slate somebody to run against her. That's how the Democrats they always protect their own. They're always trying to protect those incumbents, and they honestly, it's that old Chicago saying, "There's nothing to see here. Keep moving."
Yeah, prosecutors are alleging that starting in 2017, Ammons and her daughter received financial benefits in excess of $100,000 via a scheme including illegal payments from the, quote, Friends of Carol Ammons campaign account, and from payments made to Tatiana Ammons from local nonprofits that receive state grant funds arranged by the lawmaker. But I mean, this is par for the course for Democrats going back to the Madigan years, right?
Yeah, and then you couldn't even. I mean, this wouldn't even be plausible on an episode of The West Wing. Then that Representative Ammons' husband is a convicted felon already. Now he's in charge of a new felony, and he's the county clerk in Champaign County, which means he, as a convicted felon, indicted future felon, he is actually in charge of counting the votes for the entire county. So I mean, it's just, unfortunately, this is the symbolic of the entire Democratic ecosystem, that this is the way that they operate. It's not about doing what's best for the public, doing what's best for the citizenry. It's about what's doing best for their family's, pocketbook.
I was just thinking about this with the World Cup. I spent last weekend or the weekend before that in Chicago, and talked to a bunch of random people on the street who were following the World Cup. I mean, like people from other countries who were here visiting the United States and wanted to experience Chicago, even though there isn't any World Cup stuff happening in Chicago, or there hasn't been. And he asked me, this guy I talked to, I think he was from Austria, he said, why isn't anything in Chicago? And I said, it's because when FIFA came here years ago to kind of talk about how they could bring a bunch of money and a bunch of business and a bunch of, tourists to the wonderful city of Chicago, the Democrats in charge just didn't play ball. They didn't. I mean, it just shows you there's so much corruption in Illinois with Democrats, but there's also just utter incompetence. The whole rest of the world is seeing how wonderful the United States is, but they're not. So many of them are not seeing our region because of the incompetence of Democrats. You can blame that directly on Democrats.
Yeah, at some point, the voters, I think they're learning, but I think we all learn slower than we'd like to, and the voters are not different from that. I mean, governance at some level should matter. I to some extent, it's almost probably better that the World Cup didn't come to Chicago, because you know what, there would have been some crime and we would have gotten even a worse reputation. It used to be, I've backpacked around the world a couple times. I've literally been to 50 countries. I'm not a normal Republican. And, I would show up in other countries and they're like, where are you from? I'm like, Chicago. And they're like, the older folks would say, Al Capone, bang, bang. And then the younger people would be like Michael Jordan, and you almost cringe because we're one more headline away. I mean, look at the headlines just from yesterday. Like, we had a 10-time convicted felon who was on an ankle monitor, and he disappeared for a week from, the tracking, and they found him in the governor's backyard. I mean, the only reason we even hear about it is because it actually happened to the governor, right? But this is happening every day. He's in, these guys are in normal people's backyards, and they don't get the attention.
Bob Grogan is the new chairman of the Illinois Republican Party. The state-wide races, governor, Bailey versus Pritzker, Brian Drew running for comptroller, that's an open seat. Secretary of State, Diane Harris, Don Tracy running for U.S. Senate. Do you want to talk about any of those races?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could talk about them all. I will say just, yesterday I met with Darren Bailey for, our paths were going to cross. He was in one neck of the woods. I was in another neck of the woods, and we figured out that we were going to be going down the same highway. So we met at a coffee shop for an hour just to sort of talk through strategy and how things are going and how we can, the state party can coordinate better with his, with all of his just huge number of volunteers and the passion that he's bringing out. Don Tracy's campaign is very exciting. I think that, of anything that might get some national attention, obviously the Senate is a huge deal. And the Democrats have put forward a very weak candidate in, Lieutenant Governor Stratton.
Extremely weak.
Yes. I mean, fortunately, they had a very divisive primary. I don't think it has healed. And so, I mean, I think there's real opportunities for us to make inroads in some people that have supported some of the Democrats in that primary, some of the more middle of the road folks. And here's a dirty little secret. I know some people don't like to talk about this. You cannot win in Illinois on Republican votes alone. A third or more, 40% of the voters are independent. We cannot just recite, Republican platitudes and expect to win even with 100% turnout of Republicans. We actually have to convince people that our candidates are better. And that's what I find is you say, well, you always vote for the most qualified person, right? Well, Don Tracy, vastly more qualified than Stratton is.
100%. 100%. Yeah, we have two of the weakest. We already have an extremely weak senator in Tammy Duckworth and Juliana Stratton. Gosh, those two. I certainly hope when the dust settles that we're not represented by those two people. So get out there, Republicans, vote, organize, and join your local Republican Party. Become a precinct committeeman. Mail your vote in early. There's so much we can do, and we're just getting started here in mid-July 2026. Bob Grogan, anything else you want to add briefly before we say goodbye?
I want to add to your list of things to do, and then talk to your neighbors. It isn't just about people who pay attention enough to listen to a radio station like this. It's also the people who are completely disconnected and too busy in their lives. Talk to your neighbors and tell them what how the candidates you really like to. 100%.
Thank you so much, Bob Grogan, for coming on to Dan Proft. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Foundations of Freedom, a look at America's founding principles and the leaders who shaped our nation.
Most Americans think of Abraham Lincoln and they think of the Civil War or the Emancipation. But in 1860,